Hey everyone, we'll get started in just very soon. Okay. All right, let's get started. Hey, thanks for joining us. My name is Bob Hartford. I'm with Potomac Wave Consulting. I head up the FedDataCheck team. Most of you are familiar with that product. And today's webinar is going to be on COVID-19 spend and how it should be reported in FPDS NG. We do recommend a CLP point for staying on these webinars, for staying on to the end or close to the end. To do that, there's a couple things to do to maximize the ability to get that one CLP point. One is participate in the polls. Throw in an answer when we throw up a poll question, asking you to respond to a question, and keep the screen that you're sharing this webinar on your main screen. That helps when the FATAS representatives evaluate whether to grant that CLP point or not. Okay, and feel free to raise your hand or a chat question. We'd like to make these as interactive as possible so everyone can share their experience. Okay, the agenda for today. What is the correct way to report COVID-19 spend in FPDS NG? Why is that important to code it correctly? We're going to go through our data check number 152, which catches cases when COVID-19 is not reported correctly in FPDS NG. How you can track your agency spend automatically. I hope this is going to be working. We're working feverishly right now to get that back online. If it's not online by the time, I can still demo it. And if it's not interactive at the end of this webinar, I'm going to send you what you need and you'll be able to do it at the end of the day. And then how you can identify your agency's COVID-19 coding errors. Whether you are a FedDataCheck subscriber, your agency is a FedDataCheck subscriber or not, and a review. Some definitions here. This is really for your reference when I'm going to send you the PowerPoint deck One thing I am going to talk about is false negative, false positive. In this context, particularly a false positive, that's when FedDataCheck flags an FPDS NG transaction and says, you, COCS, you did it wrong. There's entries in one or more data fields that are incorrect. When in fact, the transaction is perfectly correct as is. So FedDataCheck thinks that something is wrong, but in actuality, there isn't. That's what I'm referring to as a false positive. False negative would be the other way. There is something wrong with the transaction, but we did not flag it. And we'll go through some examples in regards to COVID-19 coding and FPDS NG, where these come into play. All right, what is the correct way to report COVID-19 spend? Head here. So for the data field 6R, National Interest Action, set the NIA code to P20C, COVID-19 2020. Some of this is going to be painfully obvious, but let's just go through it. Angela, I see you have your hand up. Was that from earlier or? Okay. You can look at they announced national interest action codes in FPDS NG. So this one was added on or around 3/13/2020 to 07/01/2020. So if your transaction is between those dates, is signed between those dates, and it's related to COVID-19, that's how you need to code it in FPDS NG, specifying this NIA code. That is in the newsroom section. So when you go to FPDS NG, this is where you're going to be landing. Actually, they have it here too, but it's the newsroom is where you'd always find announcements on things like new NIA codes. And one thing in FPDS NG, the National Interest Action Code does not propagate from the referenced IDV nor from the mod 0. So it is not related to the award. It's related to the transaction. Oh, wait a minute, doggone it. People are not seeing the PowerPoint. A couple people like that. Can people? Okay, now I can. Oof. All right, so I think I've cleared that up. Thank you. Just to review it, what is the correct way? This is the first main slide. We went through the definitions earlier. Set the NIA data field 6R, set the NIA code to P20C. We looked at the announcement of the code, new action code. To find the NIA codes, I click on the newsroom tab, and here it is here. All NIA codes have dates which they can be used. So if your sign date falls outside of this period, you can't specify that particular NIA code. So for now, if the sign date on the transaction is between these dates, you can enter P20C if it's applicable. And the NIA does not propagate, so you can have a blank NIA code on the mod 0, and then if P1 is related to COVID-19, then put the P20C on it on that modification. Okay, the second field when you're doing COVID-19 spend, and this is where it's a little different. This is a unique situation, more unique situation, and for this emergency national interest action. For the data, and this is a newly renamed field. It used to be called something like contingency humanitarian operations. But for data field 6H, you want to put C, presidential issued emergency declaration or a major disaster declaration. So it's important to put both for COVID-19 spend, and we'll see why. And you can see the so there was a national interest action. We're going to see what that's used for. And then here's the presidential issued emergency declaration. Nationwide too. Emergency declaration for COVID-19. Now with the national interest action, they do tie you down to the valid dates associated with the NIA code. You cannot enter, let's say it ends on 7/1/2020. You enter a transaction in on 7/02, the P20C is not going to be available. But for the incident period, for those emergency declarations have an incident period tied to them, similar to valid dates. So let's look at for Vermont. It's beginning on January 20, 2019. I have not been able to determine yet whether FPDS NG prevents you from, I don't think it does, so those are the guidelines, but it's a little bit, the restrictions on whether you use the code or not is different between an NIA code and designating that emergency acquisition. I hope that makes sense. One of the things when designating an emergency declaration, and we'll see examples associated with the presidential issued emergency declaration, check the principal place of performance for the transaction against the disaster you're referencing. We'll get into that a little bit more later. And here's where I'm mentioning whether the incident period declared disasters, is that equivalent to the valid dates for national interest actions? If anyone else knows, raise your hand. Okay. So in other words, let's say that FEMA ends, we saw there on that COVID-19 in Vermont that you could put coded as an emergency acquisition in FPDS NG, obviously beginning on January 20th, 2019. Assume this is going to have an end date. It will have an end date like other emergency declarations by FEMA. Let's say it ends on July 1st. You're not going to be. Should you then not declare it as a code C emergency presidential issued emergency declaration on July 2nd? I'm just not sure how all that works. Anyone else knows? Let us know. Here's Julie. Maybe. No. Okay. Julie, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, it's just been my experience that that you can put in the emergency acquisition field at any time, and it
okay.
There's nothing that FPDS NG does to prevent you from putting that in. And the reason I know that is because we've had a number of users enter that in outside of an emergency, and we've had to have them correct it.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the point there, thanks, Julie. The point, abide by those dates, those incident period dates, they call them, with the disaster declarations. But FPDS NG is not going to put a check on you when you do. Okay, why? Let me see if I can actually pull up an example of how it's been coded correctly. And I have one right here. I should have it. So let's take a look at an example of what we're actually talking about here. I have a Department of Interior example. Let's see what we got. Let's see how they did it. Red River Resources, this is a BPA, but they have coded this as COVID 2020. And where is the emergency acquisition? There it is right here. Emergency acquisition, presidential issued emergency declaration of major disaster, COVID-19 2020. So they've got both those fields right. You can check the description, transaction description. It's got COVID-19 in there. So that's how to do it. Okay, why? Why is that important to do this? The National Interest Action Code, take a look at this GAO report, sums it up well, allows agencies to track data on contract actions related to national emergencies, providing government-wide insight. Let's go out and take a look at that full quote. Anytime you see that blue font in an underline too, by the way, it shows its hyperlink. There we go. All right, let me find that quote. So I'm looking for, there we go. The National Interest Action Code, that's what they're referring to, allows agencies to track data on contract actions related to national emergencies, providing government-wide insight into response and recovery efforts. So that's how decision makers, heads of agencies, head contracting authorities to assess how they're responding to a national emergency. And here's the most interesting thing, is that if you look at the top reporting requests out of FPDS NG, and that also so the top informational requests, top reporting requests out of FPDS NG are all NIA related. So I think that shows why, if the transaction is related to COVID-19, why it's important to remember to put that P20C code in the transaction, because everyone's looking at the data and making decisions and planning their strategy off of, presumably, off of the spend that's been done and what they plan to do in the future. Okay, so then now let's see why is it important to fill in that emergency acquisition field in addition to the NIA code. Here was my thinking on that. The FAR serves as puts a lot of restrictions on what COs and CSs can and cannot do when it comes to acquiring goods and services. One of the things the FAR says you cannot do is you cannot issue a women-owned small business sole source, emphasis on sole source, set aside when ordering against the Federal Supply Schedule or GWAC. I don't really want to debate that at the moment, but I put the FAR reference in here as to when you can restrict competition in ordering against an FSS or GWAC, and it's also our FedDataCheck number 133. So in the interest of the government trying to be fair to everybody, which is as well as acquire supplies and services in a most effective manner, says it's not fair to do a sole source, socioeconomic sole source set aside. 8A has an exception when ordering against an FSS or GWAC. So that would be classified as a restriction as to what you can do. It also grants. It also gives you additional authority under certain circumstances. I don't have to tell you this, but just to make my point, if it's a compelling urgency, the best example in one of these webinars that we had was a NOAA official. I know I've told this story before. NOAA had a ship where the fire alarm system was malfunctioning. Obviously an urgent, possibly life-threatening situation. You don't have to compete that. Find the first person you can find who can, within reason, fix the situation. So you get additional authority under those circumstances. So when you designate that C, Presidential Issued Emergency Declaration, you get the flexibility in subpart 18.2, aptly titled Emergency Acquisition Flexibilities. What are some of those? So these are the only times this 18.2 comes into play, where you as a COCS get this additional authority. A and B are DoD related. C is what we're talking about today, Presidential Issued Emergency Declaration, like COVID-19 pandemic. You also get this if you designate it as an award in response from or response to or recovery from a biological, nuclear, so on disaster. That's obviously pretty rare. And the state and USAID has a special case where they can get these emergency acquisition flexibilities. But the point, if you put that C, Presidential Issued Emergency Declaration, in your transaction, you then have the additional authority under this subpart, which includes use of local area set aside. And if you do a local area set aside in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, when your agency calculates a small business goalie percentage, the obligated dollars now count double. So you do a women-owned small business, let's say a hub zone, small business set aside, local area set aside. Let me throw out that hub zone. That's not correct. You do a local area set aside, meaning that only vendors within the affected area can bid on the contract based on your authority in 18.2. And let's say you award $1 million under that local area set aside. When your agency calculates a small business goalie percentage at the end of the year, that transaction is going to count as $2 million for the purposes of calculating your small business percentage. How do I know that? Because that is in the appendix of the Small Business Goalie Report. This column is aggregated pursuant to the RISE Act and or the National Defense Authorization Act. Contracts meeting any of the following criteria will have the dollars right there. You can see that. Dollars doubled. Signed after that date, and the local area set aside is set to yes. You also get it doubled if the vendor's address is in Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, Samoa, Northern Mariana. That was news to me recently. I just learned about that. Let me do a poll here, actually, while we're going here. I want to do two quick polls. Have you executed a COVID-19 related award? Okay, and that's great. A lot of you have. So there's a lot of great experience out there. I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on, and if I know I have another Potomac waiver on here, if we can get some of your experience along with this webinar, that would be great. Okay, and let me do one more while we're at it here. Have you ever awarded a local area set aside in response to a presidential issued emergency declaration? Now, based on our experience, there are a lot of COs and CSs who confuse a local, not many, but a good number, confuse a local area side with a small business set aside. As you may know, this is a set aside where you restrict it geographically. The hurricane hits Puerto Rico. To clean up the debris, only Puerto Rican located vendors can bid on your solicitation. That's what I'm referring to here. And this seems about right. Not many answering yes. And you don't see too many of these. So a lot more COVID-19 awards being made than people using that local area set-aside authority under subpart 18.2. Does anyone want to raise their hand and talk about the local area set-aside? Stephen, did you have a comment or? Okay. If anyone wanted to raise their hand and talk about their local area set-aside, that would be great. I don't see any hands going up. Oh. Okay. Another thing that you get under when you make a transaction in relation to an emergency acquisition. So you got maybe when you initially made the award last summer, it was not related to an emergency acquisition, but P2 is. The micro purchase threshold increases from 10,000 to 20,000 on any contract to be awarded or performed or purchase to be made inside the United States. The SAT limit also increases under your 18.2 acquisition flexibilities. Okay, so why is it important with this COVID-19 case to get these codes right? Everybody's looking at the data. Document that if you did do a micro purchase threshold for $19,000, that it was within the rules. Why? Because you had emergency acquisition filled out, code C, presidential issued emergency declaration. Okay, what is a FedData Data Check? And let me start up here. It's a database record and also includes an associated email alert that flags an FPDS NG transaction due to an apparent FAR violation or logical inconsistency. One way that, and I'm going to tie this into COVID here in a second. One way is that conflicts with the FAR. Actually, let's take a look at one of those. I'm going to log into FedDataCheck now. I'm actually already logged in, FedDataCheck.net. I'm logged in as a Veterans Affairs user. Since I am logged in as a Veterans Affairs user, I'm going to click on the VA logo. And let's look at a FedDataCheck data check that is flagging a transaction because it represents an inconsistency with the FAR. I clicked on page 7 listing. And that's going to list these data checks in numerical order. I think virtually everyone on here is from an agency that has a FedDataCheck subscription. And if so, you can email, I'll show you my contact information at the end. We'd be glad to set you up with an account so that you can do just what I'm doing. All right, check 10. Small business size is designated, coupled with the inclusion of cost accounting standards clause. Hyperlink, blue font, underline, so I can drill down. And let's see what this is saying here. FPDS NG entry states that CAS applies and the CO's determination of business size is small business. What's the problem? Contracts awarded to small businesses are statutorily exempt from the cost accounting standards. Well, let's go take a look at this one. Hit view. If I scroll down to the bottom, I see small business. It is determined to be a small business for this award. And then if I look at the cost accounting standards, yes. Small business, yes. Those are the two fields. Why is that a problem? Well, we give you the FAR reference here, 30.000. Part describes policies and procedures for applying CAS. This part does not apply to sealed bid contracts or to any contract with a small business concern. So when those transactions hit FPDS NG, we download all transactions from civilian agencies into our database. We look at CO business size field. We look at the cost accounting size field. If those run afoul of this rule, we flag it and send the person who entered it an email. Here's another type of contradiction though. There's nothing, it doesn't violate anything in the FAR, it just doesn't make logical sense. Sole source small business set aside that received more than one offer. Just look at an example of that. And I will back this up 1 year. So now I'm looking at, for all organizations within Veterans Affairs going back to FY19. Hit apply. And let's see if we got one of those. We do. Incidentally, a lot of these ideas behind these checks, some of them originate with us, Potomac Way FedDataCheck team. The one we're going to be looking at originated from a colleague of yours who at the time worked at NIST. So she had this insight. She saw this in her acquisition and oversight role. We're then able to code it into the database and share it with everyone else. Point being, if you have any ideas like this, it'd be great if you let us know. That way we would provide some insight and educational benefit to all your other contracting official colleagues. Okay, so there's no FAR references on this one, but we're saying the award was a sole source small business set aside, but it received more than one offer. Doesn't make sense. So in this case, the two fields we're looking at are the type of set aside, 8A sole source. Actually, is this an IDV? It's a delivery order against an IDV. 8A sole source, so it propagates down to the delivery order. Number of offers, 3. So that was hard to reconcile. You can't reconcile it. And we'll see false positives are possible. Another thing we do with FedDataCheck is we aggregate the percentage of errors in, so how many out of 100 transactions, what percentage of them have one or more errors in them. So the numerator would be transactions with one or more errors. The denominator is all transactions. And we give you a percentage for your department as well as agency, suborganization, bureau, and you get to compare it to our other subscribers. So benchmarks for how well you're doing with your FPDS NG data quality. Okay, how does this relate to the topic at hand? We created a new data check, number 152, to look for coding inconsistencies regarding COVID. And there are 3 types of errors. Before I get there, I did get a question here. If an action from Rusty, if an action was awarded in support of COVID-19, but not funded with COVID-19 funding, would the COVID-19 coding and FPDS NG reporting requirements apply? I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that one, Rusty. Does anyone else know that question? So what Rusty's asking is, I made an award, so it was funded, I guess, through some other means. But yep, the money, originally we made the fund. I don't have an answer on that. Project funding. Anyone have an answer for Rusty? It wasn't funded with COVID. Oh, wait a minute. Melinda, I'm glad you raised your hand.
I'm just curious. So it's a COVID-19 award and there's no funding, but you coded the NIA as COVID-19.
Let me read the question. Maybe I can get Rusty. Rusty,
Hi,
elaborate
Bob.
on the question?
Sure. Yeah, we have a project that we were trying to open up a building, a large facility, and there were some deficiencies that were preventing the completion and subsequent occupation of the building. Well, it's a $125 million facility. There was work that we were going to have to do to eventually get it open, but the medical center had identified that building as a potential COVID-19 patient overflow facility, and that's real. It really could be, but we need to get those deficiencies fixed first. So I awarded an action to a vendor using project funds, but under the sole source justification in support of COVID-19. It was work that we were going to do eventually at some point, but we just turned up the timeline for this pandemic.
I would actually consult with your contracting officer about that, or your head of the contracting activity, because that's different. And I used to be in 1102, and I work with FPDS a lot with my team lead, Paulette. I would probably instruct you not to code it COVID-19 because it's not 100% COVID. It's like kind of lingering. But when you do that modification and you do have all the issues worked out and it is COVID, then I would code it at that time as COVID. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I would definitely refer and consult with your contracting officer or higher level about that.
Yeah, no, I'm the contracting officer, and my head of contracting activity, he's also aware of it. It's just one of those things that we were under the impression that it's important for others and us to track these COVID-19 contracts and the funding associated with that. So
Yeah.
like Bob said, people are looking at this data. I don't know if they'd be so interested in looking at something that was going to happen eventually anyway. You know, anyway, no,
All right.
I hear what you're saying. I think there's some gray area there. I think if somebody questions me, I think I can speak to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a kind of a definitely an iffy situation.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Rusty. Thanks, Melinda. Great interchange there. That's, all right. Let's look at. I give some examples here. So there are three types. I'm going to click through them, and then we're going to look at some actual examples. The NIA code is blank. The emergency acquisition code is correctly coded to C. And this is the big one. And I'll specify that we're looking between the dates that the COVID-19 is active. So 3/13/2020. So it's signed between 3/13/2020 and 07/1/2020, and it's got that C in the emergency acquisition code, but you left the person left the NIA code blank. And this is about $1 billion if you look at civilian agencies where this pattern holds. And we're going to look at some examples. Now, it's also possible. Remember, I talked about false negatives, false positives. It's possible that is how it should be. And we'll think of some examples on that. But let's just go through them quick. Emergency acquisition code looks correct. NIA code is blank. And then there's the reverse. The NIA code is P20C, and the emergency acquisition code is blank, or it's not C. It's A, B, or blank. That doesn't lead to an undercounting of the COVID-19 spend, but it's not correct. There are no false positives there. If you got PCC in the NIA code, you got to have C in the emergency acquisition code. There's no way around it. Why? Because President Trump issued a nationwide emergency declaration for COVID-19. Okay, so that's two. The third one is the NIA code is blank and the emergency acquisition code is X, not applicable. So there's nothing in the NIA code. There's really nothing in the emergency acquisition code, but the transaction description reflects that it is a COVID-19 acquisition. In other words, it's got COVID-19, coronavirus. I think I looked for 4 different terms in the scenario. All right, let's look at some actual examples. And I'll use Veterans Affairs as the example. All right, here's one right here. There's nothing in the NIA code. The emergency acquisition is none, X, not applicable. And let's look at what's in the transaction description. Again, I got that blue font and an underline. You're a FedDataCheck subscriber. If you're an agency that's with the FedDataCheck subscription, as VA is, NIA none. Emergency acquisition not applicable. In support of COVID-19. That looks wrong. That one looks wrong. That one is wrong. Let's see. So that was that third type of error. Let's look at another one. So we can get an obvious one in here. Here's one. I'm working from the bottom up. So that was the third error. This is the middle error that we talked about. All right, they got the emergency acquisition coded right. Remember that NIA code is between 3/13/2020 and 7/1. It's in the window of the valid dates for the P20C NIA code, but the national interest action is blank. No P20C. They got this right. It's in the window, and they got COVID-19 in the description. That's not necessary. We would have flagged this anyway, but it's pretty obvious that this one is not correct. And this one is where those decision makers, those most popular reports, everyone's looking at the data. You wouldn't see this one when they ran that report for COVID-19. So in other words, I did verify when I did look at least one of these. These reports here all drive off of the NIA code. So that one would have dropped off the radar mistakenly. All right, and there is the third error too, and this one has it here. This is one here. This is an interesting one. In the window of the P20C, 13/7/1, you got the NIA code, but you got the emergency acquisition off. A and B are DoD related codes in emergency acquisition. C is the one you want. So if you look up, you can go out to that statute. I'm not going to do it. But if you Google 10 U.S.C. 101 A13, you're going to find that that's in relation to a Department of Defense operation, DoD related. And this thing was contracted by Veterans Affairs, funded by Veterans Affairs. So C was the one you're looking for there, not that this is either A or B. So when I say A, B, and C, by the way, if you go to FPDS NG, click on Work Site, come on down here to the Data Dictionary, Control F, Emergency Acquisition. A is contingency operation, is defined here, humanitarian there. There's the A and B code. This is the one you want. I say the C code. X is not applicable. It's not an emergency, not an acquisition in relation to an emergency acquisition. Okay, so those are the examples. I went through. If you leave the NIA code blank and it's looks like it's COVID-19, that's $1 billion of the civilian agency total right now. Not counting, it was COVID-19 spend, but it's not counted as such. And I wonder if I can give you some. Now, think about this. How could this be actually correct? Is there a case in, say, come up here in June where it might legitimately be a C, emergency acquisition, that not be related to COVID-19? And the answer to that is yes. Could be. And let's get an example on that. FEMA.gov disaster. So here I'm at the disaster declaration. Here's where you can query all the disasters. FEMA.gov disasters. And let's put in an incident period of starting of this year and going through, let's just say June. So that hasn't come yet. And I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to look at all the FEMA declared disasters, presidential issued disasters. So here's one here. On May 8th, there was a declared disaster that would have qualified for putting C, in the emergency acquisition field for Arkansas severe storms. So a CO could have made an award or a transaction in response to this disaster. And that was after the start of COVID-19. How would you code it? Put C in the emergency acquisition field, leave not a national interest action, so you leave the NIA code blank. So it's possible. It's possible that that is correct. I haven't seen any. I actually checked and tried to find some. But we, FedDataCheck, are making the assumption, and so far it's accurate, that 99% of the time plus it's going to be wrong, but it doesn't have to be. And another one here is on this one here where you got COVID-19 in the transaction description. It must be COVID-19 related. Well, that's not true either. Let's take a look at this one. It's a BPA call. Let's see. See, this one here, they're just extending a contract period of performance due to COVID-19 complication. So, it's not as if they're trying to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 or just saying, oh, look, you guys are, and this happened quite a bit. We actually ruled these, we found a way to block these from getting flagged and unchecked, but just to point out, just because you see COVID-19 in the transaction, it could be, we understand the vendor's having trouble getting workers into their office due to COVID-19, so we're going to extend their period of performance. So we think these numbers are, from looking at this one in particular, that one looks accurate, but, FedDataCheck is making a 99% likelihood estimate that they're wrong. They don't necessarily have to be. Right now, I hope we've shown that the importance of this, and we've shown some that are clearly wrong. And I would like to point out that this idea behind this, the algorithms, the logic by which we came up with this check, was given to us by one of your colleagues at the Department of Treasury, Alan Monaco. Now, his insight into how important and how to properly code these transactions, given that we've coded them now into FedDataCheck, and we have about 20,000 contracting officials that we interact with through these email alerts. Could possibly interact with one of these email alerts. If you don't do it wrong, we're not going to interact with you. Possibly. We'd love for you to come to our site and look at our stuff, but you're not going to get an email alert and a flag, assuming it's done properly. But that's the universe of people we potentially work with. Receiving a data check, one of these email alerts, here's one that was on check 52. Here was the PID. We send it to the person who entered in the data into FPDS NG. We identify the transaction. We explain why it's wrong, what to do to fix it. Obviously, that's apt not to be that much fun to get one of these alerts, or you have other things to do, such as actually getting the supplies and services to battle COVID-19. But I hope we've shown that how important it is, particularly in this case, to get the data right in FPDS NG. Right now, 17% of the spend, approximately $2 billion of civilian spend, it's pretty clear is not being properly reported in FPDS NG. And the country decision makers and others are relying on it. I'm getting near the end. So if you, I hope again, if you have one of these insights or if you notice something that people may be doing wrong and in a pattern, I hope you follow Alan's example and show us how we could code that and automate those alerts in the FedDataCheck. I think it helps. Anyway. How to track your COVID-19 spend automatically. I hope this is working. If not, it'll be working by the end of the day. I did include this in the download section, but let's see. All you have to do, let's see if it's working yet. Just thinking. Yes, it is. Hey, how do you like that? Got lucky. Okay, so this is in your download. So now you're, you want to keep track of your COVID-19 spend, and you'd like to track some of your errors. Let me make sure I haven't. We're getting right towards the end here, and I lost the question section. Oh, I'm trying to find if anybody has a question. I apparently closed it, so I'm gonna have to move on. Raise your hand if you have a question. That would be good, or put in the chat. Okay, you want to track your COVID-19 spend, and you're from the Department of Energy. I think we have an energy person on here. Let's see how we do that. So all I did was, it's in your, hopefully you can see where to download it. All you got to do is open up this Excel spreadsheet, and you got to be a little bit patient while this thing opens up. It takes a little while to run. It's updating the fields now, waiting for query to be executed. So in other words, what this Excel spreadsheet is doing is it has a data connection into FedDataCheck, and it's automatically retrieving information as to the spend. So it updated it in relation to interior, because that's how I had it set. Let's say you wanted to look at energy. Do we have anybody here from energy? Raise your hand. How about from, we'll do Department of Justice, 1500. So now to get to 1500, instead of flip this from interior to justice, I'm gonna hit this filter sign here, and this is in the spreadsheet how to do it. And I click on 1500. Now I've broken the data out by COVID spend by agency for the Department of Justice. And I want to get this trend line here. And we'll do that. Try that one more time. Here we go. Now I get a nice trend line. So if you just, I'd show you where to make the change. If you just point here, if you want to flip that to your own agency, you hit that filter right next to this thing, a pop-up will happen, and select whichever department you're with. Or you could actually go down too farther and select the agency you're with. So let's say I want to do U.S. Marshal Service only within the Department of Justice. Here's all the Marshal Services COVID-19 spend. I hit save up there. Now, next time I open this up, Justice Marshal Service data will automatically be refreshed with the latest data from FPDS NG. I will note that FedDataCheck runs 2 days behind FPDS NG. So transactions entered in today, Thursday, will be available in the spreadsheet on Saturday. So those are the cells in Excel that you want: B5, B79, F79. B5, so let's look at B79, cell B79. B, come down to 79. Here, you can see that. It's that little filter. It looks like a filter. Click that, pops up, pick your department. If you want to go down farther, hit the plus sign. Might have to make this a little bit bigger down at the end. I want to look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 1630. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1625. Click on them. Hit OK. They don't have any. Well, they get one spend on 4/1. One date they spent it on. Okay, after August 1st, we're going to stop this spreadsheet, but if you would like to continue to track it and you're an FedDataCheck subscriber, let me know. In other words, there's a sunset date on when the spreadsheet's going to stop working, and it's going to be tied to COVID-19. Steve, do you have a question or comment? Or? Okay. All right, so that's tracking your spend. Double click on that spreadsheet, open it up. How about tracking your errors? So if you go to that same spreadsheet, after you open it up, this worksheet, this tab, that tracks your spend. COVID-19 coding errors, that's going to get into those errors we just went through. All right, who do we have here from Veterans Affairs? Anyone from Veterans Affairs? So let's assume you did want to do VA. So here I would, again, right now it's justice, but I can click, I'm going to pick somebody, I don't know, transportation. See what's going on there. Again, I hit that filter, come down, click transportation. And now I'm in those situations where I think we filtered this for the dates applicable. We'll see. Let's make sure that we have the right date sign. I don't think we do. I'll have to modify the spreadsheet just a little bit. Remember, the dates you want to look at there are you want to set this up so we're only looking at 3/13. So now I'm going to filter it so that we got 3/13 through let's just do it through June. So these look wrong. So if I look at this one out here for transportation, it has that case where it has a C, it's in the right time period, but they left the NIA code blank. NIA code is blank. Emergency acquisition C, it's in the COVID-19 date frame. What does the description say? COVID-19. So that would be an error. So this tells you your spend. This shows you likely coding errors. NIA code is blank. Emergency acquisition field is right. And this is the reverse. Emergency acquisition, the NIA code is G20C, but the emergency acquisition code is off. So it catches two of those three errors we went through. So the spreadsheet's going to catch errors between the NIA code and the emergency acquisition code. If you want to do that thing where our check 152, remember we were looking in the transaction description. We saw COVID-19 and both the NIA code and the emergency acquisition code was off. To do that, you're going to have to create an ad hoc report in beta.samp. That's outside the scope of this webinar. James, did you have a comment? No. Okay. Okay. In review, if you want to be sure that your COVID-19 spend is being properly coded in FPDS NG, set the NIA code to P20C, COVID-19 2020, set the emergency acquisition field to C, presidential issued emergency declaration, and remember, double check the transaction description. So we saw a lot of COVID-19, coronavirus, COVID space 19. That's another good check to make sure that you're capturing all of your COVID-19 spend. Well, I ran a little over. Any final comments or questions? Can't see the questions because I X'd it out. Sorry. Let's see, I can get the questions back. There we go, I got them back. Let's see if I got any. I'm with EA, thank you. I didn't miss the questions. How do we get the spreadsheet regularly, or is it the same one you sent in the handout? The one I'm going to send it out, I made a few adjustments to it. I'm going to send it out with a PowerPoint deck. So this afternoon. That's it, everyone. I'm going to go through who we are and some background on Potomac Wave if you're interested in hearing that, if you haven't heard it before. Should we be coding those POP extensions with COVID codes? Peer-to-performance extensions. Yeah, that's a good question, Monica. I'm going to say no, you should not. Yeah, we rule those. First of all, those extensions are going to have a. So Monica's question is, when you looked at this one here, that's the end of the webinar. If you want to stay, fine. I'll go through some of these questions. So this one here, and it was an extension to period of performance due to COVID-19 for office relocation of office management within the VACO campus. You know, if you're just saying, wow, boy, we understand, you know, there are no air flights regularly scheduled anymore, so it's going to take longer for you to get up to Alaska to finish building the weather station. To me, that's, you know, I guess like anything else, it's something of a judgment call. But I did talk to one or more of these people who extended the period of performance due to COVID-19, and it was in their judgment, your fellow contracting official peer, who said, no, it isn't. Yes. Was COVID-19 in the transaction description? Yes. Was it really related to COVID-19? No, we were just referencing COVID-19 because we were doing something else on the contract due to complications from COVID-19. Not as if we're battling the virus with this period of performance extension. Monica, you know, I guess you're having trouble building that weather station in Alaska. It's going to take you another month. Therefore, you're going to have to keep people on payroll for another month. So we'll add more money to it. Maybe in that case it is. So I'm going to hedge a little bit on my response on that. But what we don't flag in FedDataCheck, when we see COVID-19 or coronavirus in the transaction description, and there's no NIA code and there's no emergency acquisition code, and if the action obligation is 0, we ignore it. So if we miss some here, that's too bad, but it's not going to impact those dollars that people are really going to be focusing on with the with those high interest reports we saw in FPDS NG. So that one that we don't flag, even though it had COVID-19, it wouldn't appear as a transaction in here, but there's no money on it, but it's just an extension. That's me. If you want to get access to FedDataCheck and your agency is a subscriber, or if you just want to see if you can anyway, shoot me an email. That's my office number. That's not a good one. So shoot me an email about FedDataCheck. We were very, very pleased, I have to say, to be recently given the NOAA Small Business of the Year for 2019. And we also won an award from Washington Technology. You can get a trial to FedDataCheck, 5,000 micro purchase for 4 months. You'll get that COP point, recommended COP point. I'll send out a training certificate just a bit here. We're not a small business anymore. We're an OTSP on a lot of different schedules. Our area of focus is procurement metrics. We looked at one today with FPDS NG data quality. Another area we get involved with, all of these. One of them is decreasing competitive one bids. That's an area that also can be impacted by people not coding things optimally in FPDS NG. Any final comments, questions? All right. Well, listen, thanks everybody. We'll send out an announcement on some future webinars and hope to see you on them. And I'm going to send out the PowerPoint deck and the Excel spreadsheet a little later on today. Thanks. See you.